Dear friends, I am glad to welcome you today. Let's dive together into an unusual and fascinating subject that has intrigued the minds of many generations. We are going to talk about how science views esotericism, where they intersect, and why this field still attracts the interest of millions of people. Esotericism is not just a word, but an entire layer of knowledge, ideas, and practices that go back to ancient times. It includes mystical teachings, philosophical systems, methods of self-discovery, and the search for hidden laws of the universe. This category covers such phenomena as alchemy, astrology, Kabbalah, yoga, meditation, energy practices, and much more. At first glance, all this may seem far from science. However, if we dig deeper, we will see interesting intersections. Science, on the other hand, is built on experience, evidence, and strict verification of facts. It requires that every claim can be tested by experiment and reproduced under the same conditions. That is why many researchers approach esotericism with caution. But this does not mean that the scientific community completely rejects everything related to this field. On the contrary, history offers many cases when ideas that originated in esoteric systems inspired new discoveries. For example, alchemy was once considered an esoteric art, with the main goal of transforming base metals into gold. But behind these pursuits were experiments with substances that gradually grew into modern chemistry. Likewise, astrology, which is now classified as esotericism, once gave a strong push to the development of astronomy. People observing the stars and planets tried to understand patterns and connections, and this journey led them to the first scientific models of the universe. Modern science, of course, looks at esotericism through the lens of rational analysis. Research in psychology, neurobiology, and quantum physics provides us with tools to analyze many phenomena that were once considered purely mystical. Meditation, for example, was long perceived as a spiritual practice accessible only to the chosen few. But today, neuroscientists study its impact on the brain and find convincing evidence that regular practice actually changes neural connections, improves concentration, and reduces stress levels. A similar story unfolds with concepts such as human energy or the so-called biofield. Esotericism has long spoken of subtle layers that surround a person. Science does not use these terms directly, but research in biophysics shows that living organisms do indeed emit weak electromagnetic fields that can be measured with instruments. While this is not the same as what esoteric teachings describe, the fact that invisible processes exist around us is already confirmed. Special attention should also be given to the psychology of perception. Many esoteric practices are linked to altered states of consciousness. For science, this provides valuable material. By studying such states, scientists gain insight into how the brain works, how our perception of reality is formed, and what hidden reserves the human mind may access. Experiments with hypnosis, lucid dreaming, and altered states of consciousness show that the boundaries of the human mind are much wider than we usually assume. It is also noteworthy that in recent decades, a new field has emerged, attempting to connect scientific discoveries with esoteric experience. This is quantum metaphysics. Scientists approach such attempts with caution, but it is impossible to deny that the language of quantum physics often resembles esoteric ideas. For example, the concept of uncertainty or the possibility of multiple realities existing simultaneously echoes ancient beliefs about the multiplicity of worlds. Thus, even at this stage, we can already see that science and esotericism are not two completely opposing camps. Rather, they are different ways of looking at the world. One is based on facts and verification, the other on intuition and symbols. But both share the same goal: to understand how reality is structured and what role humans play within it. This common drive for knowledge unites science and esotericism, even though their methods are different. Humanity always seeks answers to fundamental questions. Where did we come from? Why do we live? And what awaits us after death? Science responds through measurement and experiment, while esotericism relies on symbols, myths, and inner experience. Now let us take a closer look at what modern science has already said about esoteric practices. One of the most vivid examples is the study of meditation and breathing techniques. Scientists across different countries have conducted experiments measuring brain activity during these practices. Results show that experienced practitioners exhibit reduced activity in stress-related centers and increased levels of neurotransmitters associated with happiness and calmness. What was once considered mystical enlightenment is now described as a result of nervous system functioning. The same applies to visualization practices. Esotericism holds that an image created in the mind can influence reality. Science explains this through brain activity. Imagined images activate the same neural networks as real events. This means that by training imagination, a person actually prepares their body for certain actions. This is why athletes use mental rehearsal and psychologists apply positive visualization techniques. Energy practices such as Reiki or Qigong also draw researchers' attention. Of course, scientists have yet to find direct proof that energy in the esoteric sense exists. However, they do observe positive health effects, reduced anxiety, improved sleep, and stabilized heart rhythms. The effect may be linked to breathing techniques, focus, and relaxation of the nervous system. And while scientific explanations differ from esoteric ones, the results remain real. Another important aspect is the connection between esotericism and psychotherapy. Many practices once considered occult are now used successfully in psychology. For example, working with archetypes, symbols, and the subconscious has become part of deep therapy. The ideas of Carl Jung, who was inspired by esoteric teachings, are still widely applied by psychologists to better understand the inner world of a person. Of course, criticism also exists. Science demands evidence, and many esoteric claims do not withstand strict testing. There are individuals who misuse mystical terms to manipulate or profit, promising miracles where none exist. This undermines trust in these practices and creates the impression among skeptics that esotericism is entirely based on illusions. However, it is important to remember, the absence of evidence does not always mean that a phenomenon does not exist. History is full of examples where discoveries came centuries after the first speculations. Electricity and bacteria were once considered unbelievable, even mystical. But time and research put everything in its place. This is why the scientific approach to esotericism is not about rejecting it entirely, but about studying it carefully and separating what is valuable from what is doubtful. Many practices genuinely bring benefits to health, self-discovery, and inner development. And even though esotericism uses symbolic language, rational elements can often be found within it. In conclusion, science and esotericism are two paths leading toward the same horizon. One path goes through logic, the other through intuition. One relies on experiments, the other on inner experience. Yet both help humanity better understand itself and the world around it. Esotericism reminds us that the world is bigger and deeper than it appears. Science gives us tools to explore that world. Together they form a more complete picture, where both precise calculations and inner revelations have their place. Friends, thank you for your attention and for joining me in this reflection on science and esotericism. This subject is vast and inexhaustible, and each person can find their own path within it, whether through facts or through inner exploration. Thank you, and see you next time.